Previously on Balls.
Prof Noakes, are you there?
I'm right here. Thanks very much, Darren.
Thanks for answering your Skype call and welcome to Balls Visual Radio this afternoon. Have you got your camera going? Come on, Prof.
I will get the camera going.
Yeah, we want to check
out.
out.
To make sure I look best possible. Here we go.
We were just talking about that right now. We want to check out your BMI.
There you go.
Tim, you're looking great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I need to pan out a little bit there, Tim. We want to check that BMI of yours.
Yeah, the BMI is 22.
Is that good?
Anything below 25, eh?
Really?
Getting a bit lean.
That's very good, yeah.
But you've always kind of been lean and mean, though. You haven't really been an overweight kind of person.
Well, I used to be 21 kilograms heavier, so
Sure.
you know, and because of my height, it didn't look so bad. But certainly, I'm feeling a lot better now. Thanks very much.
But you weren't in category obese.
Well, I was
Never.
overweight.
Well, and
I was 28. My BMI was 28.
Classify this problem we have in this country and probably a lot of countries in the world. We are one of the most obese countries in the world now, I think. And what classifies as obesity? Obviously, not just being over your.
Yeah, I think it's a large number of people with a body mass index above 30. So I guess once 15% of the population has a BMI over 30, then you can't classify it probably as an obese nation. It might be 20%, but it's in that range.
Is BMI always an accurate way to look at a person's weight, whether they are obese? Because a lot of people go to gym and then they do weight and then they build muscle and that kind of stuff.
That's correct. If you can be very muscular and have a very high BMI and be extremely healthy, you're quite right. But just talking about the average person who's not doing a lot of weight training, the BMI is quite a good measure of your general health. It's not absolute because there seems to be values even up to 26, 27 can be healthy in some people. But I generally think that that above 25 is probably not ideal. And certainly if you're not very athletic, above 25 isn't good.
Come over here, Johnny. I just wanted to, can you tell if someone is, just by looking at them, if they're got a problem?
Well, I saw John a few months ago at the medical doctor's 10K race. And I think he beat me, so he can't be heavier than me.
Thank you very much, Tim.
What do you weigh?
I've now come down from 113 before Tim's diet. I'm now 98.
So you've lost 15, Johnny?
Yes, nearly
98.
98, yes. Thanks, Darren.
Well done, John.
Thank you.
And what do you weigh, John? What's your height, Johnny?
Height is 5'11", so that's about 1.80, I think.
Okay, I'm going to work out your BMI.
Oh, thanks.
But no, hold on. I don't
So
understand.
5.11 would be more than 1.80. It'd be more like 1.85 or 1.86.
No, well, I'm 180, so I think that's... But Tim, you seem to get shorter as you get older. Is that true?
Well, it depends what you eat. You see, if you eat this terrible diet that we're meant to eat, and you're not getting enough vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins, you will shrink. Yeah. And it's really interesting at my age of 64 and a half. I'm watching the people around me for two things. I'm watching how their mental aging occurs and if they get shorter. And it's my opinion that if your diet's wrong, you're going to get shorter more quickly, and certainly your brain function is going to disappear more quickly as well.
Why, are you getting shorter, Johnny?
I think so, Darren. That's what I said to Tim. I was
Sally says.
Oh, nonsense.
All right. So the book, which is a sellout apparently, first run, all sold out already.
Yeah, it's been spectacular. We sold 10,000 copies in 4 weeks.
That's amazing. So that's first run, hey?
Excuse me?
That was the first run. They did a first run of 10.
Yes, the second edition is coming into the shops in a few weeks' time, in about 10 days' time.
All right.
And we're hoping that'll go also in 2 weeks. Our problem is getting them printed quick enough to get them into South Africa.
Sure.
But the only person or book that's sold as well is Harry Potter. So it's quite an achievement. I know Jake White's book sold an inordinate number. I was told something like 200 or 3,000 copies, 200 or 300,000 copies, which is just out of any league.
Yeah, I did.
Which is astonishing. So, but hopefully we're going to try and push him a bit on that one.
Well, there we go. It's only a couple of days and already sold out. Yes, Simon?
And what does it deal with, Tim? Because I know in your previous book, Challenging Beliefs, you kind of dipped into the low-fat, high-fat, low-carbs theory. So what does this one deal with?
Well, what happened here is Jono Proudfoot and David Greer, who are both expert chefs and both adventurous, so they do lots of long-distance running and swimming, came to me and they said, well, let's put a book together. And that was on July the 8th this year. And they suddenly worked out if they wanted it out by December, we had to have it finished in 1 month. So within 1 month, we got together again, and we had their recipes. There were about 140 recipes, and I'd written about 10,000 words. And I said, no, I'm not happy yet. Give me another 2 weeks. So I took another 2 weeks, and we finished it literally in the middle of August. And the first proofs were out in about a month later. They had to go and picture all the recipes and put it all together and proof it. And the first copies came to Cape Town middle of November. So it took about 4 months. It was absolutely astonishing that we got it together so quickly. So what is it? It's about 100 of the most delicious recipes you will ever see. They are high fat, high protein, low carbohydrate. And it's also a guide to how you should eat this way. And in addition, I've got some of the science which shows why this type of diet is particularly healthy for people who, like me, are what we call insulin resistant or carbohydrate intolerant.
Yeah.
So that's the book. It's really a recipe book, but it also does talk about the science of why this works for so many people.
Well, I'm going to go back to my experience again because I think last time we spoke to you, you were aware of it. I brought out a book with a trainer who was busy working with me. So it's not my expertise, but just my experience. And then she was adding the expertise in and amongst this and what you need to do. And in that particular one, and I mean, on this one in particular, I lost something like 40 kilos. All right, from a great deal of obesity, nearly 140 down to below 100. I should be around 95. That's my fighting weight. And I lost the weight. Look, there's no diet. I don't care out of what book you do if you do not get in the gym or do exercise. There's no ways you can do it without that. Okay, so that was a big part of it. Then through circumstances, I managed to add on another 20 when I stopped going to the gym. So I cut the exercise and the weight just goes up. I went back onto the sort of onto the rails again, but a different track, because after listening to your theory, I decided, well, let me cut out a lot of the carbs that were still, because in that original one and in our book, you literally counted your carbs. I think you were allowed 6 proteins a day, 3 fats, and 4 carbs. All right. Now, one of the things I found back then versus now, where I cut out all breads, not even rye bread, basically any carbs. I don't drink beer and stuff like that, but the only carbs I would have, which I think maybe you might not agree with, is baked potato. That's the only one I will have once a week. Other than that, cut out the carbs. I found that back then, even with the 4-carb theory, it stops you feeling bloated. Every time you eat any carb, it's like it expands inside you. And even though you've stayed within your range, you still feel very, not full, but bloated and uncomfortable. This time around with that, and I'm eating the bacon and I'm eating, the proteins, whatever they are. Cut out the gravies, obviously, because those are bad fats, I would imagine. Yeah. But I found that it's felt a lot more comfortable, and I'm basically dropped back to 98 now. So I've dropped just over 20 kilos again. And it just feels a lot better, obviously with a lot of gym with it. So in context of your book, where am I on this track?
Great, because Darren, that really helps me to explain a couple of things. Firstly, I disagree with you about exercise. I understand if you are eating a high carbohydrate diet, the reason you exercise is to burn the carbohydrates.
Okay.
That's the paradox. You see, if you've got carbohydrates in your body, you can do only 2 things with them. You either burn them as a fuel during exercise, or you turn them to fat.
Yeah.
And so that the reason why it was working for you was you were burning those carbohydrates. The instant you stopped, those carbohydrates turned to fat.
Yeah.
If, like me, you're a little bit carbohydrate intolerant, what you've done now is by cutting the carbs, you're no longer getting that drive for fatness from the carbohydrates. And so therefore you find it easier to maintain weight. Not for one moment am I suggesting people shouldn't exercise. You must exercise.
No, please go on, Tim. Please advocate that.
It's very, very important to exercise. But what you find, once you get your carbohydrate intake right, you really don't have to exercise as often or as vigorously to maintain your weight. So the key is to get the right amount of carbohydrates in.
Yeah.
And what you might find is that you're still eating a bit too much carbohydrates, and that you could restrict it even further and benefit more in terms of your weight might drop more and you might feel better. But I mean, that's, you're obviously very happy with the way you are now. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're perfect. But the key for people to understand is that it's the carbohydrates that drive the obesity. And there's a very, very fine cutoff And if you're below that cutoff, you will control your weight effortlessly. But if you're above it, you will struggle and you'll have to exercise and you'll be continuously hungry, and you won't understand why. And if I can just add, the final point is the reason why this diet works is because it is nutrient-dense foods. And the body responds to the nutrient density of the foods. And if you are continually hungry, it's because you're giving yourself nutrient-poor foods, and all the carbohydrate foods are nutrient-poor. They don't have all the vitamins and the nutrients that you need for your body to function properly. So you have to eat all of the time to take your hunger off. Once you put nutrient-dense fatty foods and protein-rich foods, your hunger completely disappears. It completely changes, and you aren't always looking for food.
Yeah.
And that's the key. Unless you can control your hunger, you cannot control your weight.
Is there such a thing as good carbohydrates? For example, the ones that you find in cereals, for example.
Ooh, don't mention the word cereals to me.
No, I know
Anything in a box, Simon.
No, I know your stance on cereals, but I just thought perhaps people listening don't know, you know.
But steamed veggies?
Johnny, you're not on that
yes,
yet.
absolutely. Vegetables are the sort. Let's again say, if you're carbohydrate intolerant like me, and if you have diabetes or obesity, the key is to restrict the carbs. And the only carbs that are really healthy for you, which you can have, are in some fruits like strawberries and berries, because they're nutrient dense and they don't have much carbohydrate or sugar in them. So they're very important. And the vegetables are fine if they're leafy and they grow above the ground. Those ones, you can't eat enough of them. They're very, very healthy for you. But where we make the error, for example, is if you have to cut your carbs to less than 50 grams a day. I eat about 30 grams a day. One apple and one banana is 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. You will not lose weight. If you're carbohydrate intolerant and you have one apple and one banana,
Wow.
You will not lose weight. And what we have been fooled into believing is that sort of fruits are healthy, so you can eat as much as you like. You've got to have your 5 fruits a day. Well, I promise you, if you are obese and you're eating 5 fruits a day, you will never, ever, ever lose weight. It's impossible because it just prevents you from doing that.
Have you been to the new Burger King in Cape Town yet?
Well, you know, I would like to say that
You've got to have had a Whopper. Come on.
And the veg, but you can't eat the chips and the bun.
Yes.
Then it's not worth going and having a Whopper if you can't.
I'd
have
love
the
to
chips
catch
and the
Tim in a scandal, scoffing a pizza or something like that.
or having a Whopper.
Yeah, or gorging a burger or something like that, and the fries, and publish it in heat.
So I'll tell you what we're going to do, because it's always fascinating talking to you. And I know there's a lot more we want to chat about, particularly the criticism, again, that's come out. The people that have not minced their words on various websites and stuff about your theories again. And also I want to talk to you about the Jacques Kallis study that you did and the data that came out of it, where I think you said, based on the data, he's the greatest cricketer that ever lived. Is that correct?
Yeah, you know, well, certainly he's the second greatest cricketer. No one can contest that.
Hold the thought on who's the greatest out of your data, because what we're going to do is we're going to let you go for, if we can, for 5-10 minutes. We've got to do news, take a tune.
Sure.
We'll come back just after 4 o'clock, Skype you again, get you back on the Skype, and then we'll carry on with that discussion and also talk about the Jacques Kallis thing, because it's fascinating stuff, if that's okay with you.
Pleasure. Thanks
awesome.
very
We'll
much.
Skype you in about 5 to 10 minutes again, and we'll carry on with this chat. Very interesting, as always. Prof. Tim Noakes from Cape Town on Skype, talking about his new book, and we'll also talk Jacques Kallis based on his studies and data that he's managed to get up. Who is number 1 if he's number 2? All right, so we found out in that little break we had with Prof. Noakes that Johnny's BMI is 30.29. 30.29.
Which is obese.
Well, yours is also obese, Simon.
I'm not. I'm just a little overweight.
Yeah, but
you're
not
obese.
No, I'm not obese at all, because I've lost 14 kilograms. I
That's
run
what the
15
BMI
Ks
calculator
every
says,
day,
Johnny. You're
and I'm
obese.
not at all.
Anyway. Prof. Noakes is back with us again. Fascinating chat a little earlier on before 4 o'clock about his new book. You can also follow Prof. Noakes on Twitter. Some people have been tweeting. They wanted to know, first of all, some people want to know when it's available in South Africa. You said 2 weeks it'll be here?
Yeah, less than that. Probably 10 days, Darren.
All right. So these sales then have, were these South African sales or international sales?
No, we don't have an international distribution yet, because it's really a small company in Cape Town that put it together.
Yeah.
And for us to get it to distribute it globally is really very difficult. Publishing is not an easy game. It's very expensive to get it produced overseas. So we're just seeing what we can do.
All right. So you say your second run will be available within 10 days or thereabouts.
That's correct.
Okay. Because one of our American listeners want to know where they can get the book over there. Can they get it online anywhere? Can you order it somewhere?
Kalahari.com.
All right. Kenneth, Kalahari.com. Just go there and you can order your copy and they will ship it to you in the US of A. All right. No doubts. I'm sure that you're not scared to read all the comments and criticism. Obviously, when you put forward this theory before, I think over a year ago, people climbed on. People climbed on again. Some people have even gone to the point of using strong language like your theories are bullshit. As one guy said on online. Have you read all the comments and the naysayers?
Oh, yes, I love them. It's very important because as a scientist, my personality is always, I assume I'm wrong. And when a person writes something, I assume they're right. And I say, okay, so why are they right and why am I wrong? And then I look through what they've said and I analyze it and I learn from that. And that's the key in science. I've had more rejections in science than most scientists because I've also published more. And every time you publish, the probability is about 50% that it'll be returned to you and rejected. And so you go through it and you see what the people said and you rewrite the paper and you redo the analysis and you do everything and eventually it's accepted. So that's how you work as a scientist. So if people criticize me, the person who looks at it most seriously is myself, because that's how you learn. And I'm very happy if people tell me what you say is wrong, because then I'm going to find the truth. You can't find the truth by hiding behind something that you believe is true when it's not.
Yeah.
So I love criticism. It obviously hurts me when it gets a bit personal, and I understand why people get personal, but that's when they don't have any facts.
Yeah.
But I've spent 3 years learning about nutrition. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing. I've read more about nutrition in the last 3 years than I suspect most nutritionists do in their lives. I've read over 100 books and probably not tens of, but fives of thousands of articles. And just as when I wrote Law of Running or I wrote Waterlogged, I went to the basics. I got right to the concrete foundations. And that's what I've done with this. And when you get to the foundations, you find they are very flimsy. There is absolutely no evidence that a low-fat diet is healthy for you. None at all.
But this is
It was started in 1977 on speculation, no science. Now, we've had 3 or 4 major clinical trials costing billions of dollars, not hundreds of millions, but billions of dollars. Not one of them has been able to show that a low-fat diet makes you healthier than just eating what you'd always eaten. And no one is told that. And this whole idea, when you go to a dietitian and they say you must avoid saturated fat, there is no science behind that. There is no single trial where they have taken saturated fat out of the diet and the people have benefited. And what's happened is we've replaced saturated fat with carbohydrates, but even worse, with partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. And they are profoundly damaging to health. And no one will say it because that industry is one of the most powerful in the world. The edible oils industry has the largest lobby in Washington. And there is no scientist or very few scientists in the United States who are prepared to stand up against the edible oil industry. And particularly if they're doing research, because they know their research will not be funded. And so that's the problem. Behind the scenes, you have this conspiracy, and people say I'm a conspiracy theorist. Well, go and read it and you'll see that there really is, that the advice we are given was to sell products and unfortunately to make us unhealthy. And you can make 2 choices. You can either just continue to listen to this nonsense and the dietary advice that you get and be unhealthy, or you can question and say, I want to be healthy. How do I get there?
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the whole, what people call it conspiracy theories. But this lobbying kind of a factor in many things, and even in the medical field. And again, all of this is easily proven by personal experience. If it's worked for you, it's worked for you. Everyone is different. In my case, having suffered from lymphedema from as a result of melanoma, I spent 27 years with a leg that was growing and growing and growing to ridiculous proportions in circumference, the lower leg, because I had all my lymph glands taken out. Not once did a doctor ever tell me, other than keep your leg up and wear a Sigvaria stocking, give me any advice, because there was no medical or pharmaceutical advice that they could actually give me, which obviously is part of their whole group, and they're in bed with the pharmaceutical guys, etc., etc. But not once did anyone say, go to a manual lymph drainage specialist. And I had to get one in Durban to contact me when they found out what my problem was. And within 6 months, 50 centimeters came off my leg, and it still remains that way. Now, why does the doctor not know about that? Because they don't get money from these guys.
Yeah, the issue, you're absolutely right. You see, I trained in medicine between 69 and 75. And that was before the pharmaceutical industry controlled the teaching in medicine. Now, people say, how can Tim Noakes say the pharmaceutical industry controls the teaching at the medical schools? They do, because they control all the research that is being done. Now, I, as a professor in the exercise sciences, can talk about nutrition because I'm not dependent on anyone for funding from the pharmaceutical industry. There's no professor of cardiology who could say what I'm saying. There's no professor of medicine in South Africa who could say what I was saying, because within a week, they would lose all funding from the pharmaceutical industry and the department would collapse. And medical schools would be the same. So you are not going to hear what I'm saying from people who are embedded in medicine. Tragically, medicine has come down to the wrong model. The wrong model is you are sick because you haven't got a particular chemical in your body, and that chemical can only be provided by the pharmaceutical industry. And that is nonsense. Illness is not caused by the lack of a pharmaceutical agent in your body. It's caused by many things. But I have learned in the last 3 years that 85% of chronic ill health that people my age suffer from is because of what we eat. And if you don't look after your eating, you will not be healthy into your old age.
Simon?
Sorry, Johnny.
No, you go.
But Tim, what I found interesting, and you spoke about it in that challenging beliefs, is that high fat, low carbs is not new. It's been around for so long. The theory.
It's been around since 1862, and the most famous medical textbook in the world is a book by William Osler, and it was published, the first one, in 1892. It said the treatment of obesity is a low carbohydrate, high fat diet. That was it. And that was standard treatment till after the Second World War. And what happened was that the people who were really doing the research on low carbohydrate eating were Austrians and Germans. And they published mainly in German. And at the end of the Second World War, they lost the war. And we took English as the primary language, not German.
We are going to make the Americans fat.
And we lost all that research. And then the English model of obesity came through, in the North American model, which is that you simply eat too much and you don't exercise enough. And that is not the right model at all. Obesity is much more complex than that.
Okay, last one, Johnny.
Yeah, Tim, I also am led to believe that when margarine is manufactured, it's actually black before all the colorants and things are added to it, and that there is no clinical trial that proves that butter is bad for you.
No, in America, they actually changed their tune now, saying margarine's bad for you and butter's good.
Well, margarine is bad for you because it contains trans fats, and there's no question, no one will question now that trans fats are bad. The trans fats have been known to be bad since 1970, and the American Heart Association, for the first time this year, thank goodness, thank you for waiting 40 years to warn us that we shouldn't be eating margarine or eating trans fats because they're bad for us. Actually, we knew that 40 years ago, but you told us we have to eat margarine and hydrogenated vegetable oils to be healthy. Well, unfortunately, you were wrong, and it would be very nice if the heart foundations globally would come out and say, guys, don't eat polyunsaturated oils, hydrogenated polyunsaturated oils, because they're bad for you. But there's not one heart foundation in the world who's prepared to do it. And they meant to be looking after our health.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Just quickly changing tack before we wrap it up with you. It's been another fascinating chat, and that is what we, I think it came out yesterday or the day before. You put some data together and came up. I thought it said Jacques Kallis, greatest cricketer of all time. As you say, number 2.
No, I think that it's very difficult. Certainly, he's the greatest modern cricketer by a long way. I think there's no question about that. it's really interesting that a guy called Gary Watson on News 24 has put together all the statistics, which I hadn't done. I'll explain what I did. But he put all the statistics together, and it's an article on News 24, and it's titled, "If Not Kallis, Then Who?" ? And he puts Kallis's batting, bowling, and fielding up against everyone, and says that Kallis would be the guy you would first select in any team. He would be number one in any team that you selected, because he's absolutely what the selector would want. And on those grounds, he believes he's the greatest cricketer of all time. All I did was I said that Bradman is considered the greatest cricketer of all time because he was two world-class cricketers in one. In other words, he batted number 3 and he had an average of 99.94, which meant he was a world-class batsman with an average of 51, and the other guy was 49.94. And you would be very happy to have two number 3 batsmen who could bat like that. So he was two batsmen in one. Kallis is also two world-class cricketers in one. He was a world-class batsman. He was the 3rd highest scorer in the history of cricket, despite the fact that he bowled. Now, you just think about that. The only two guys ahead of him are Tendulkar and Ponting, who were specialist batsmen, and their average, in fact, wasn't even as good as his. So he outperformed them, but no one considers that, that he was as good or better than Tendulkar. And he was a bowler as well. And then he was the 29th best bowler in the history of the game in terms of wickets. And what Gary Watson indicated, that his wicket taking was actually superior than some of the greatest bowlers of all time. He also makes the point that the bowling, when Kallis was batting, was some of the best we've ever had in the world, like Shane Warne and Kumble and McGrath and Walsh and so on. That this is who he had to bat against at number 3, yet he had this average. So on those grounds, I think that he definitely was two cricketers in one. And I think that you could make a very good case that he probably was at least as good as Bradman in those terms. But of course, that will never be allowed because Bradman is so iconic and legendary that you're not even allowed to mention anyone in the same terms as Bradman.
But imagine how much better he could have been, Tim, if he'd followed a high-fat, low-carb approach.
Yeah, he was high carb, very high carb.
On that line, I might just tell you that the Australian cricket team has adapted this diet, and they did it in between the Ashes series. They did it at the end of the Ashes in England, and the 3 guys who've admitted they've done it, they haven't all admitted, were Shane Watson, Steve Smith, and David Warner. And they were the guys who scored the hundreds in the last test, I think, the 3 of them. And David Warner has just come out and said it's just completely revolutionized his cricket, and you can see how he's batting now. So they're going to be in South Africa, and they will be talking about their adoption of the low-carbohydrate diet and how it helped them.
Yeah, they've been going on about quinoa, which apparently is a very, very good, what is it, a carb, but it's a very good carb.
Yeah, it's got more protein in it.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. Now, of course, most of them are not profoundly carbohydrate intolerant. Shane Watson said, he's been fat all his life, and now finally he could lose weight effortlessly. And David Warner was exactly the same. He lost quite a substantial amount of weight. And he says now he just doesn't get tired batting anymore. The change has been dramatic for him.
Well, when he comes out here, he won't get tired batting because he's not going to be there long. There you go. It's going to be a fascinating trip, and we're hoping to catch up with Mike Horn. I'd like to talk to him about the whole, because it's going to be a psychological series. There's no doubt about it. Can the Aussies get under our skin again? Because the times they've done it before, they've beaten us. But is this team strong enough to withstand what they are going to be bringing here? And that's going to be the key to the series, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. The teams, there's probably little to differentiate in their skill and talent. And so it's the belief systems that's going to determine their success.
Well, maybe we'll have a next chat to you about that when we get closer to that tour. Tim, it's been fascinating talking to you again. Always very, very interesting. And, of course, it all comes from research and the fact that he's a scientist and does read a lot of books and not just suck it out of his thumb. Thanks a lot for your time this afternoon. All the best. Good luck with the rest of the book. And as we say, within 10 days, we'll be back on the shelves in South Africa. And for those that were asking on Twitter, that's when you'll be able to get it. All the best, Tim. Have a good 2014.
Thank you, Darren. Same to you and to you, John.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye. There we go. That's Prof. Tim Noakes joining us on Balls Visual Radio and Mix 93.8 FM.
Visual Radio. Weekdays from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central African Time. Radio like you've never seen it before. Balls.co.za